Morrison stared at the grizzled soldier in shock. "You can't be serious." "I've been fighting Indians for 20 years, Brennan said, "and in all that time I've never seen one willing to walk into an armed camp to prevent bloodshed. That takes courage." "It takes stupidity," Morrison protested. "No," Brennan said thoughtfully. "Stupidity is starting a war you can't win. And if what this young man says is true, if his uncle really does command the loyalty of the largest Apache band in the territory, then a war is exactly what we can't win." The admission from the most experienced Indian fighter in Silver Creek sent a shock through the crowd. If Brennan was having second thoughts about the wisdom of warfare, then perhaps it was time for everyone to reconsider. "So what are you suggesting?" Harper asked. "I'm suggesting we give peace a chance," Brennan said. "One meeting. If it works, we avoid a war that could destroy us all. If it doesn't, we're no worse off than we are now. About loving him, about trusting him, or about believing that peace is possible." "All of it," Harper said heavily. "Any of it." Isabella finally turned to face her father, seeing the genuine worry etched into every line of his weathered face. "I've never been certain of anything in my life, Father, but I'd rather bet everything on love than live safely with hatred. And if you're wrong, if he doesn't return, or if his uncle refuses to meet with us, then at least I'll know I tried to build something instead of just tearing things down." Harper nodded slowly, though she could see he remained unconvinced. "The territorial governor sent word yesterday. He's heard about what happened here." Isabella felt her stomach clench with dread. "What kind of word?" "The kind that suggests he's not pleased with my decision to negotiate rather than eliminate the Apache threat." Harper moved to pour himself a whiskey, despite the early hour. "If I may," he said carefully, "I appreciate that you've come this far. It shows good faith on both sides. It shows that my cousin has more influence than wisdom," he too said bluntly. "But Chief Manuelito wishes to hear what promises the white man offers this time." "This time?" Isabella asked, sensing undercurrents she didn't understand. "Your people have made promises before," Kaelan explained quietly. "Treaties that were broken as soon as they became inconvenient. Land that was granted and then taken back. Peace that lasted only until someone found gold or silver in Apache territory." "This is different," Harper insisted. "We're talking about a real peace negotiated in good faith between equals." Etu's laugh was harsh as winter wind. "Equals? When have white men ever considered Apache to be their equals?" "When they fall in love with them," Isabella said boldly. "When they see past the color of skin to the person underneath." "One couple does not make peace between nations," Etu replied, though his voice had lost some of its edge. "Love is a luxury for those who do not have to bury their children." The pain in his words was unmistakable, and Isabella felt her anger transform into sympathy. "Have you lost children?" Etu's war paint couldn't hide the grief that flickered across his features. "My son, my daughter, both killed by soldiers who said they came in peace." The simple statement hit Isabella like a physical blow. She began to understand why this proud warrior looked at her with such suspicion in his eyes. She represented the people who had murdered his family. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "No parent should have to endure such loss." "Sorry does not bring back the dead," Etu replied, but his voice had lost its harsh edge. "Sorry does not stop the soldiers who march toward our winter camps, even now." "What soldiers?" Harper demanded, his face going pale. Kaelan and Etu exchanged a look before Kaelan answered. "Governor Williams has mobilized 2 companies of cavalry. They're 3 days' march from the largest Apache settlement." "Dear God," Harper breathed. "He's planning to attack while we're trying to negotiate." "The governor does not want negotiation," Etu said grimly. "He wants extermination. Your meeting was a trap to keep us talking while his soldiers moved into position." "No," Isabella said desperately. "That's not true. We came to you in good faith." "Perhaps you did," Etu acknowledged. "But your leaders play a deeper game. While you speak of love and peace, They prepare for slaughter. Harper's face was ashen with shock and growing rage. I swear to you I knew nothing about this. Williams never told me about any military action. Because he does not trust you, Kaelan said gently. Your willingness to negotiate makes you suspect in his eyes. The revelation hit Harper like a thunderbolt. His own government had betrayed him, using his peace efforts as a distraction while they prepared for genocide. The political calculation was brutally simple. Let the naive local officials pursue diplomacy while the professionals handled the final solution. How long do we have? Harper asked, his voice hollow with defeat. The soldiers will reach the winter camp tomorrow at dawn, Itu said, unless they are stopped. Can your people escape in time? Some might, but there are elders who cannot travel quickly, children too young to ride hard. Many will die. Isabella felt the world spinning around her as the full horror of the situation became clear. While she and Kaelan had been celebrating their small victory in preventing local violence, much larger forces had been moving toward a massacre that would dwarf anything Silver Creek's men might have accomplished. There has to be something we can do, she said desperately. There is, Itu said, his hand moving to rest on his tomahawk. We can die fighting instead of dying like sheep. Or, Kaelan said quietly, we can try something that has never been attempted before. All eyes turned to him as he stepped forward, his face grave with purpose. What if we don't fight the soldiers? He said. What if we join them? The suggestion was so unexpected that for a moment nobody spoke. Then Itu exploded in fury. Join them, join the men who come to murder our families. Not join their cause, Kaelan said quickly. Join their march, intercept them before they reach the camp, force them to see that not all Apache are their enemies. You're talking about suicide, Harper said. Those soldiers have their orders. They won't stop to listen to reason. They might, Isabella said slowly, beginning to understand Kaelan's plan. If they see that some Apache are willing to work with whites instead of fighting them. And when they decide to kill us anyway, Itu demanded. Then we die for something meaningful, Kaelan replied. We die trying to save our people instead of just adding to the body count. Itu stared at his cousin for a long moment, his painted face a mask of conflicting emotions. This is madness. Yes, Kaelan agreed, but it's the kind of madness that sometimes changes the world. Harper was pacing now, his mind clearly racing through possibilities and obstacles. Even if we could reach the soldiers in time, even if we could convince them to listen, what makes you think they would disobey their orders? Because their orders come from politicians who have never seen the reality of what they're commanding, Isabella said, the plan taking shape in her mind. But soldiers are human beings. When they see families, children, people who want peace instead of war. You're betting a lot on the conscience of men trained to kill, Itu observed. I'm betting on their humanity, Isabella replied. The same humanity that allowed love to grow between your cousin and me. Itu studied her face intently as if trying to read her soul. You would ride with us. Risk your life for people you have never met. They're Kaelan's people, Isabella said simply. That makes them my people too. The simple declaration seemed to hit Itu like a physical blow. For the first time since his arrival, his expression softened slightly. You speak as Apache women speak, he said quietly, with courage and loyalty. Then perhaps there is hope for peace between us, Isabella replied. Harper had stopped pacing and was staring at his daughter with a mixture of pride and terror. Isabella, you can't be serious about this. It's too dangerous. Everything worthwhile is dangerous, Father. You taught me that. I taught you to be careful, not reckless. And now I'm teaching myself to be brave instead of safe. Before Harper could respond, the sound of more horses reached them from the main road. But these weren't Apache ponies, they were the heavy mounts of cavalry, and they were approaching at a gallop. Company coming, one of Itu's warriors called out in Apache. Through the dust cloud, Isabella could make out the blue uniforms of territorial soldiers led by a young lieutenant whose face was flushed with urgency. "Mayor Harper," the officer called out as he reined in his lathered horse, "I have orders from Governor Williams. You're to surrender any Apache present to military custody immediately." Harper stepped forward, his face grim with understanding. "On what authority?" "By order of the territorial governor and the United States Army." The lieutenant replied formally, "These individuals are considered enemy combatants and are to be detained pending transport to the reservation." "They came here under a flag of truce," Harper protested. "They're here to negotiate peace." "Their intentions are irrelevant," the officer said coldly. "My orders are clear." Itu's hand moved to his weapon, but Kaelan caught his wrist. "Wait," he said quietly. "Wait for what?" Itu snarled. "For them to put us in chains. Wait for wisdom to prevail over fear." Kaelan replied, his eyes never leaving the lieutenant's face. Isabella stepped forward, placing herself between the soldiers and the Apache warriors. "Lieutenant, what's your name?" "Lieutenant Morrison, ma'am," the young officer replied, clearly uncomfortable with the situation. Isabella's blood ran cold at the familiar surname. "Any relation to Marcus Morrison, my older brother, ma'am." The connection explained everything. Marcus had clearly used his family's military connections to ensure that his humiliation would be avenged, even if he couldn't be present to enjoy it personally. "I see," Isabella said carefully. "And did your brother explain the full situation to your superiors?" "He explained that you've been corrupted by Apache influence and that your father has been compromised in his judgment," Morrison replied, his young face showing discomfort with his role. "And you believe that?" "It doesn't matter what I believe, ma'am. I have my orders. Orders to arrest unarmed men who came here seeking peace. Orders to arrest enemy combatants who pose a threat to territorial security." Isabella could see the conflict in the young man's eyes. He was clearly uncomfortable with his mission, but military discipline kept him from questioning his superior's judgment. "Lieutenant," Harper said firmly, "I'm still the mayor of this town. These men are my guests here under my protection. With respect, sir, your authority doesn't extend to matters of territorial security. Governor Williams has assumed direct control of all Apache-related issues, including the right to execute prisoners without trial," Kaelan asked quietly. Morrison's face went pale. That's not... My orders are to transport them to Fort Wingate for processing." "Processing," Itu repeated with bitter laughter. "Is that what you call murder now?" "Nobody's going to be murdered," Morrison protested, but his voice lacked conviction. "Then why are 2 companies of cavalry marching toward Apache winter camps?" Isabella asked. "What kind of processing requires that much firepower?" Morrison's shock was genuine, and Isabella realized that the young officer had been told nothing about the larger military operation. He had been sent on what he thought was a simple arrest mission, unaware that it was part of a coordinated campaign of extermination. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said slowly. "Your brother didn't mention that part," Isabella pressed. "That while you're arresting negotiators, other soldiers are preparing to massacre families. That's not... The army doesn't target civilians." "Tell that to the Apache children who won't see tomorrow's sunset," Itu said grimly. Morrison looked around at the faces surrounding him, reading the truth in their expressions. His certainty began to crumble as he realized he might be part of something much darker than he had been told. "Lieutenant," Harper said gently, "you seem like a decent man. Are you prepared to be responsible for genocide?" "It's not genocide," Morrison said weakly. "It's military action against hostile forces." "Hostile infants?" Isabella asked. "Hostile grandmothers, hostile children who have never held a weapon." Morrison's face was ashen now, the full horror of the situation beginning to penetrate his military conditioning. "There must be some mistake. The army doesn't..." "We're not..." "You're not what?" Kaelan asked. You're not planning to kill everyone in the winter camps. You're not following orders to eliminate the Apache threat once and for all. The young officer looked like a man whose entire world was collapsing around him. His hand moved uncertainly toward his sidearm, but his heart was clearly no longer in his mission. I should report back to my commanding officer, he stammered. And tell him what? Harper asked. That you found no Apache here, that the reports of their presence were mistaken. Morrison stared at him in confusion. But they're right here. I can see them. Are you certain? Isabella asked softly. Are you absolutely certain that you saw Apache warriors at the Harper estate today? The question hung in the air like a lifeline thrown to a drowning man. Morrison's gaze moved from face to face, reading the silent plea in their eyes. I was told they would be here, but you found nothing, Harper said firmly. Just a peaceful household going about its normal business. Morrison looked at the Apache warriors who had remained perfectly still throughout the exchange. His military training warred with his conscience duty, battling against humanity in his young heart. If I report that I found nothing, he said slowly, and my superiors discover otherwise, then you followed your orders to the best of your ability, Isabella said. You can't be blamed for the poor intelligence you were given. And the attack on the winter camps. What attack? Kaelan asked innocently. I'm sure the army would never target civilian populations without proper cause. Morrison understood the game they were playing, and after a long moment he nodded slowly. You're right, of course. The army operates under strict rules of engagement. Rules that require verification of hostile intent before taking action, Harper added helpfully. Exactly, Morrison said, his voice growing stronger. And if such verification were delayed, it would only be proper to postpone any military action until the situation could be clarified. Isabella felt a surge of hope. This young officer might just be their salvation, the key to preventing the massacre that loomed over the Apache camps. How long would such a delay last? She asked carefully. Morrison considered the question, his mind clearly working through military protocols. Proper verification procedures could take several days, perhaps a week if the situation is particularly complex. And during that time, no action could be taken without proper authorization from territorial command. It wasn't a permanent solution, but it might buy them enough time to find one. If they could delay the attack long enough to get word to Washington, to bring public attention to what was happening, they might be able to prevent the genocide that Governor Williams was planning. Lieutenant, Harper said formally, I want to thank you for your thorough investigation of this matter. Your professionalism does credit to the uniform. Morrison straightened his shoulders, some of his confidence returning. Just doing my duty, sir, ensuring that the Army acts only on reliable intelligence. As the young officer prepared to leave, Etu stepped forward. Lieutenant Morrison, he said quietly. Morrison turned his hand, instinctively moving to his weapon before he caught himself. Your conscience honors you, Etu said simply. Your children will be proud of what you did today. Morrison nodded stiffly, clearly moved, despite himself. I hope so. I truly hope so. After the soldiers had gone, the Apache warriors seemed to exhale collectively, the tension draining from their rigid postures. We have gained time, Etu said, but not much. Eventually they will discover the truth. Then we use the time we have, Kaelan said. We find Chief Manuelito and convince him to bring the entire tribal council to meet with the territorial authorities. They will never agree to such a meeting, one of Etu's warriors protested. Too much risk, too little trust. Then we make them an offer they cannot refuse. Isabella said, the plan forming in her mind, even as she spoke. We offer them the one thing that might make peace possible. Which is? Harper asked. Isabella took a deep breath, knowing that what she was about to propose would change everything, not just for herself, but for everyone she loved. We offer them me, she said simply. I'll go to the Apache as a hostage, a guarantee of white intentions. If the territorial government tries to betray the peace negotiations, they'll have to explain how the mayor's daughter ended up dead in an Apache camp. The silence that followed her proposal was deafening. Everyone stared at her as if she had lost her mind. Absolutely not, Harper said flatly. I won't let you sacrifice yourself for politics. It's not sacrifice, Father. It's investment. In a future where children don't have to grow up hating each other. Isabella, Kaelan said gently, what you propose is incredibly dangerous. My people are frightened, angry. Some might see you as a symbol of everything they hate about whites. And others might see me as proof that not all whites are their enemies, she replied. The risk is worth taking. Itu studied her with something approaching respect. You would truly do this, leave your people to live among ours. I would do anything to prevent more death, Isabella said firmly, and anything to be with the man I love. Even if it means never returning to the world, you know. Isabella looked around at the estate where she had spent her entire life, at the father who had both protected and constrained her, at the familiar comfort of a life she had never truly chosen. This world was never really mine, she said quietly. I was just a guest here waiting for my real life to begin. Harper's face crumpled with pain and pride in equal measure. You've become someone I hardly recognize, and yet I've never been more proud of you. Then support me in this, Isabella pleaded. Help me become the bridge between our peoples. And if I can't protect you once you're gone, then you'll know that I died trying to build something better than what we have now. Itu stepped forward, his war paint unable to hide the emotion in his dark eyes. If you come with us, you come as family. As Kaelan's woman under the protection of our clan, any who harm you will answer to me. And if the peace negotiations fail, if the soldiers come anyway, then we die together, Itu said simply, fighting side by side as allies instead of enemies. Isabella felt tears streaming down her face as she realized what these proud warriors were offering her, not just sanctuary but true acceptance. A place where she could belong, not because of her birth or her father's position, but because of her choices and her courage. When do we leave? She asked. Now, Kaelan said urgently, before anyone else comes looking for us, before the military changes its mind about waiting. Isabella nodded and turned to face her father one last time. I love you, Father, and I'm grateful for everything you've given me, but now I have to give something back to the world. Harper embraced his daughter fiercely, his tears soaking into her hair. Be careful, my dear one. Be brave, but be careful. I'll be both, she promised. And someday when this is all over, I'll come back to visit the bridge we're building together. As Isabella prepared to leave the only home she had ever known, she felt no fear, only a profound sense of rightness. This was what she had been meant to do, what all her life had been leading toward. Love had shown her the way, and now courage would carry her forward into an uncertain but hopeful future. The sun was setting as they rode away from Silver Creek. Isabella mounted on one of her father's horses beside Kaelan, while Itu and his warriors surrounded them like an honor guard. Behind them lay everything familiar and safe. Ahead lay everything unknown and dangerous. But as Kaelan reached over to take her hand, Isabella knew she was exactly where she belonged. They were riding toward either salvation or destruction, but they were riding toward it together, and that made all the difference in the world. The Apache camp materialized from the desert landscape like a vision born of earth and sky, hidden so perfectly among the red rocks and twisted juniper that Isabella might have ridden past it a dozen times without noticing. As their small party crested the final ridge, she gasped at the sight spread before them. Dozens of hide lodges arranged in careful patterns, smoke rising from cook fires, children playing between the dwellings while their mothers worked, and their grandmothers told stories in the fading light. It looked nothing like the savage encampment she had been taught to imagine. Instead, she saw a community, a place where families lived and loved and dreamed of better days, just like the people of Silver Creek. The realization hit her with stunning force. These were not the faceless enemies of her father's political speeches, but human beings with hopes and fears as real as her own. As they descended toward the camp, Isabella became aware of the sudden silence that fell over the settlement. Work stopped, conversation ceased, and every face turned toward the approaching riders. She could feel the weight of dozens of pairs of eyes studying her, measuring her, trying to determine what threat or opportunity she might represent. Kaelan moved his horse closer to hers, his voice low and reassuring. "Do not be afraid. They are curious, not hostile." "I'm not afraid," Isabella replied, and was surprised to find that it was true. Despite being the only white person for miles in any direction, despite the stories she had heard about Apache cruelty, she felt no fear. Perhaps it was Kaelan's presence beside her, or perhaps it was the simple humanity she could see in the faces around her, but this felt less like entering enemy territory than like coming home. An elderly man emerged from the largest lodge at the center of the camp, his gray hair braided with silver ornaments, and his weathered face marked by years of wisdom and sorrow. Even without being told, Isabella knew she was looking at Chief Manuelito Kaelan's uncle and the leader of this band of free Apache. His dark eyes fixed on her with an intensity that seemed to look straight through to her soul. "Nephew," he said in accented English, his voice carrying the authority of one accustomed to being obeyed. "You return to us with unexpected cargo." Kaelan dismounted and helped Isabella down from her horse, his hands lingering on her waist for just a moment longer than necessary. "Uncle, may I present Isabella Harper, daughter of the White Chief in Silver Creek. She comes to us seeking sanctuary and offering herself as guarantee of her people's good intentions." Chief Manuelito studied Isabella with the same careful attention he might give to a potentially dangerous weapon. "She comes willingly. I come because I love your nephew," Isabella said, stepping forward and meeting the chief's gaze directly. "And because I believe our peoples can live in peace if we have the courage to try." A murmur rippled through the gathering crowd, some voices expressing surprise, others skepticism. Isabella caught fragments of conversation in Apache, unable to understand the words, but reading volumes in the tones and expressions of the speakers. "Love," Chief Manuelito repeated thoughtfully. "A powerful force, but not always a wise one. Love has started as many wars as it has prevented." "Then perhaps it's time for love to prevent one instead," Isabella replied. The chief's weathered face creased in what might have been the beginning of a smile. "You speak boldly for one so young. Tell me, white woman, what do you know of our ways? What do you know of the hardships you would face among us?" "I know that I have much to learn," Isabella admitted, "but I also know that learning begins with listening, and listening begins with respect." This time the chief's smile was unmistakable. "You answer well, but words are wind unless backed by action. Are you prepared to prove your commitment to peace?" "How would you have me prove it?" Chief Manuelito gestured toward a group of women who had gathered near one of the cook fires. "Our women will judge your worth better than I. If they accept you, if they find sincerity in your heart, then perhaps we can speak of peace. If not." He didn't need to finish the threat. Isabella understood that her fate, and possibly the fate of two peoples, rested on the opinion of Apache women who had every reason to hate her. "I understand," she said simply. As Isabella approached the group of women, she felt her heart hammering against her ribs. These were the wives and mothers and daughters of warriors, women who had buried their dead and mourned their lost ones. In their eyes, she represented everything that had brought sorrow to their lives. The oldest woman in the group stepped forward, her gray hair streaked with silver and her lined face bearing the wisdom of decades. When she spoke, her English was careful but clear. I am Ayana, grandmother to Itu, mother to the fallen. You say you come in peace, but your people's peace has brought us only death. Why should we trust you?" Isabella felt the weight of generations of betrayal and broken promises in the woman's words. How could she possibly answer for the sins of her entire race? How could she prove that she was different from the countless whites who had lied and cheated and murdered their way across Apache lands? "You shouldn't trust me," Isabella said quietly. "Not yet. Trust must be earned, and I have done nothing to earn yours, but I'm willing to try." Ayana studied her face with the penetrating gaze of one who had learned to read souls. "What would you sacrifice for this peace you speak of?" "Everything," Isabella replied without hesitation. "My home, my family, my old life, everything I was so that I might become something better. And if we demanded your life, if the only way to guarantee peace was your death?" Isabella met the old woman's eyes steadily. "Then I would give it gladly, knowing that my death might save other lives." The silence that followed her words was profound. Even the children seemed to sense the gravity of the moment, their games forgotten, as they watched the strange white woman who spoke of dying for peace. Finally, Ayana nodded slowly. "You speak truth. I can see it in your eyes, hear it in your voice. But truth alone is not enough. Can you work? Can you contribute to our survival?" "I can learn," Isabella said. "I can cook and sew and tend the sick. I can help with the children and the elderly. I may not know your ways, but I'm willing to learn them." Another woman stepped forward, younger than Ayana, but with the same keen intelligence in her dark eyes. "I am Itzel, wife to Etu, mother to the children he lost. If you stay among us, you will share our dangers as well as our protection. Are you prepared for that?" Isabella thought of the soldiers marching toward this very camp of the violence that could erupt at any moment, of the precarious position she would occupy as the only white person in a community surrounded by enemies. "I'm prepared," she said firmly. Itzel nodded approvingly. "Then we will teach you what you need to know, but first you must understand what it means to be Apache. Come." The women led Isabella to a secluded area near the edge of the camp where a small fire burned beneath a star-filled sky. As they settled in a circle around the flames, Ayana began to speak in a voice that carried the weight of oral tradition passed down through countless generations. "We are the Dene, the people," she said. "We have lived on this land since the world was young, following the old ways taught to us by the spirits of our ancestors. We take only what we need from the earth, and we give back more than we take. This is the Apache way." Isabella listened with rapt attention as Ayana spoke of a way of life that was completely foreign to everything she had known. The Apache saw themselves not as conquerors of the land, but as its caretakers living in harmony with the natural world rather than trying to dominate it. "Your people see the earth as something to be owned and used," Itzel added. "They dig scars in the mountains, poison the rivers, kill the buffalo for sport. They take everything and give nothing back." "Not all of us," Isabella protested gently. "Some of us see the beauty in what you describe. Some of us want to learn a better way." "Perhaps," Ayana said thoughtfully, "but you are few, and those who think like you have little power among your people." As the evening wore on, Isabella found herself drawn deeper into conversation with the Apache women. They spoke of their children, their hopes for the future, their fears about the approaching soldiers. She learned about their customs and traditions, their complex kinship systems, and their deep spiritual beliefs. But more than that, she learned about their humanity. These women laughed and cried and worried and dreamed just like the women of Silver Creek. They loved their families with fierce devotion and would do anything to protect them from harm. The only difference was that their skin was a different color and their culture followed different patterns. When the formal questioning was over, Ayana placed a weathered hand on Isabella's shoulder. "You may stay among us," she said simply. "Not as a guest or a prisoner, but as family. Kaelan's woman under our protection." Isabella felt tears streaming down her cheeks as the full impact of the old woman's words hit her. She had been accepted, truly accepted, into a community that had every reason to reject her. For the first time in her life, she felt as if she truly belonged somewhere. "Thank you," she whispered. "You honor me more than I deserve." "We honor the courage you have shown," Ayana replied, "and the love that brought you to us. But remember, acceptance is just the beginning. Now you must prove yourself worthy of the trust we are placing in you." As the women began to disperse back to their families, Kaelan appeared at Isabella's side. His face was grave with concern, and she could see worry lines creasing his forehead. "What is it?" she asked, immediately sensing that something was wrong. "Riders approaching from the east," he said quietly, moving fast and trying to stay hidden. Isabella's blood ran cold. "The soldiers. We don't know yet. E2 has taken scouts to investigate, but we must prepare for the worst." Around them, the peaceful camp was transforming with startling efficiency into a fortress. Women gathered the children and led them to sheltered areas, while warriors emerged from lodges carrying weapons and taking up defensive positions. The entire community moved with the practiced coordination of people who had faced such threats many times before. Chief Manuelito appeared beside them, his face grim with the weight of leadership. "If these our soldiers come to destroy us, what message would you send to your father?" he asked Isabella. "That we tried," she said without hesitation, "that love was stronger than hatred, even if hatred was stronger than peace." The chief nodded approvingly. "You face death with honor. That is good. It means you have learned something of the Apache way already." But before Isabella could respond, Atu came racing back into camp on his lathered horse, his painted face alive with excitement rather than alarm. "Uncle," he called out, "you need to see this. All of you need to see this." He gestured toward the eastern ridge where a line of riders was silhouetted against the star-filled sky. But as Isabella studied the approaching figures, she realized with shock that these weren't soldiers at all. Leading the group was Thomas Harper, her father mounted on his favorite bay gelding and carrying a white flag of truce. Behind him rode Sheriff Briggs, Colonel Brennan, and nearly a dozen other prominent citizens of Silver Creek. They moved slowly and openly, making no attempt at concealment or stealth. "Father," Isabella breathed, hardly daring to believe her eyes. As the riders approached the camp, Harper called out in a voice that carried clearly across the desert air, "Chief Manuelito, I request permission to enter your territory under a flag of truce. I come seeking my daughter and hoping to discuss terms for a lasting peace between our peoples." The chief looked at Isabella with raised eyebrows. "Your father is either very brave or very foolish to come here with so few men." "He's both," Isabella said, torn between pride and terror at her father's unexpected arrival. "But mostly, he's a man who loves his daughter enough to risk everything for her." Chief Manuelito considered for a moment, then nodded to Etu. "Bring them in, but keep them under guard. We will hear what the White Chief has to say." As the Silver Creek delegation entered the Apache camp, Isabella could see the amazement and discomfort on their faces. Like her, they had expected to find a savage encampment full of bloodthirsty warriors. Instead, they found families gathered around cookfires, children playing innocent games, and grandmothers telling stories under the stars. Harper dismounted and walked directly to where Isabella stood beside Chief Manuelito. His face was a battlefield of relief and reproach as he looked at his daughter. "Isabella," he said simply, "you're safe." "I'm more than safe, Father," she replied. "I'm home." The words hit Harper like a physical blow, and Isabella could see him struggling to understand how his daughter could possibly feel at home among people he had been taught to fear and hate. "I've come to bring you back," he said quietly, "and to try to prevent the war that's coming." "What war?" Chief Manuelito asked sharply. Harper's face was grim as he explained. Governor Williams has ignored Lieutenant Morrison's report about finding no Apache at my estate. He's convinced that his nephew was deceived or intimidated into lying. 3 companies of cavalry are now marching toward this location with orders to eliminate all Apache resistance. The news hit the camp like a thunderbolt. Warriors who had been relaxing around the fires suddenly tensed hands, moving to weapons, while women began gathering their children closer. "How long do we have?" E2 demanded. "They'll be here by dawn," Harper replied. 6 hours, maybe less." Chief Manuelito's face showed no emotion, but Isabella could see the wheels turning behind his dark eyes as he processed this information and its implications. "Why do you warn us?" he asked. "Why risk your own life to save your enemies?" "Because they're not my enemies," Harper said firmly. "My daughter has shown me that much, and because the man who wants to marry her is using military connections to ensure that anyone who opposes him is eliminated." "Marcus Morrison," Isabella said, the pieces falling into place. "His family has significant influence with the territorial government," Harper confirmed. "When you humiliated him publicly, when you chose Kaelan over him, you made a very dangerous enemy." "So this is all about revenge?" Kaelan asked, his voice tight with anger. "Partly," Harper admitted, "but it's also about power and politics, and the age-old belief that the only solution to the Indian problem is a final solution." Isabella felt sick as she realized how her personal choices had become entangled with larger forces of hatred and violence. Her love for Kaelan hadn't just endangered them, it had provided an excuse for genocide. "What do you propose?" Chief Manuelito asked. Harper looked around at the faces surrounding him. Apache warriors and Silver Creek citizens united for the moment by their shared humanity and their desire to prevent bloodshed. "We stand together," he said simply, "Apache and white side by side, and we show those soldiers that we refuse to be part of their war." "They'll shoot us all down like dogs," Colonel Brennan protested. "Military discipline doesn't allow for questioning orders." "It does if the orders are illegal," Sheriff Briggs said unexpectedly. "Killing unarmed civilians is murder regardless of what uniform you're wearing." Isabella stared at the grizzled lawman in amazement. "You would stand with us?" "I've been enforcing the law for 30 years, Briggs replied gruffly. "I know the difference between justice and vengeance. What Morrison's planning isn't justice." One by one, the other men from Silver Creek began to voice their agreement. These weren't bleeding heart idealists or naive dreamers. They were hardened frontiersmen who had learned to respect courage wherever they found it. And what they had found in this Apache camp was a people willing to fight and die for their families, just like themselves. "So what's the plan?" Itu asked. Chief Manuelito stepped forward, his voice carrying the authority of natural leadership. "We do not run, we do not hide. We stand here together and we show these soldiers what peace looks like." "And if they attack anyway?" someone asked. "Then we defend ourselves," the chief replied simply. "But we defend ourselves as allies, not enemies." Isabella felt a chill of fear mixed with exhilaration as she realized what they were proposing. It was madness, certainly, standing against trained soldiers with nothing but moral authority and the power of unified purpose. But it was also magnificent, a gesture that could either unite two peoples or destroy them both. "I want to stand with you," she said, her voice carrying clearly across the gathering. "Whatever happens, I want to be here, as do I." Harper added, his voice thick with emotion. "My daughter has found something precious here, something worth fighting for." As the night wore on, the two communities began to blend together in ways that would have seemed impossible just days before. Apache warriors shared food with Silver Creek ranchers, while white women learned songs from Apache grandmothers. Children from both cultures played together around the fires, their laughter carrying across the desert like a promise of what the future might hold. Isabella found herself moving between groups, translating not just languages but cultures, helping people see past their preconceptions to the humanity that lay beneath. It was exhausting work, but also exhilarating. She was becoming the bridge she had always dreamed of being. As dawn approached, the combined community arranged itself in a defensive formation that was also a statement of unity. Apache warriors stood shoulder to shoulder with Silver Creek citizens, their weapons at ready but pointed toward the ground. Women and children gathered in the center, protected by a circle of people who had chosen cooperation over conflict. Chief Manuelito and Thomas Harper stood at the front of the formation, two leaders who had found common ground in their love for the same brave young woman. Behind them, Isabella and Kaelan waited hand in hand, their love the catalyst that had brought two worlds together. The sun was just breaking over the eastern mountains when the sound of approaching cavalry reached them. 3 companies of blue-uniformed soldiers crested the ridge and deployed in battle formation, their rifles gleaming in the morning light and their faces hard with purpose. At their head rode Captain Morrison, Marcus's cousin, his scarred face twisted with the same cruel arrogance that marked all the men in his family. When he saw the mixed group waiting for him, his expression darkened with rage. "What the hell is this?" he shouted, his voice carrying across the desert silence. Chief Manuelito stepped forward, his weathered hands empty, but his voice strong with authority. "This is peace, Captain. We invite you to join us in choosing hope over hatred." Morrison's laugh was harsh as winter wind. "Peace you call harboring fugitives and consorting with savages. Peace, I call it humanity," Harper replied, moving to stand beside the Apache chief. "And I call it the future, if we're wise enough to embrace it. The only future these animals have is extinction," Morrison snarled, "and anyone who stands with them shares their fate." He raised his hand to signal the attack, but before he could give the order, something unexpected happened. From within the ranks of soldiers, voices began to speak up in protest. "Sir," called out a young sergeant, "there are white civilians down there, women and children." "Traitors and collaborators," Morrison snapped. "They've made their choice." "With respect, sir," another soldier said, "our orders were to eliminate hostile Apache. These people don't look hostile to me." Morrison's face purpled with rage as he realized that his own men were questioning his authority. The sight of Apache and white standing together as equals was challenging everything they had been taught about the natural order of things. "You will follow orders," he shouted, "or face court-martial for insubordination." But the damage was done. Doubt had crept into the ranks, and with it came the possibility of something that had never existed before in this land, a chance for peace built on mutual respect rather than imposed by force. Isabella stepped forward, then her voice carrying clearly across the space between the two forces. "Captain Morrison," she called out, "I am Isabella Harper, daughter of the mayor of Silver Creek. I stand here of my own free will as a bridge between two peoples who have suffered too long under the weight of hatred and misunderstanding. You stand there as a traitor to your own race." Morrison replied coldly, "I stand here as proof that love is stronger than hatred." Isabella shot back, "That understanding is possible if we have the courage to try." Around her, she could see both Apache and white nodding their agreement. These people had found something precious in their brief time together, a glimpse of what the world could be if fear and prejudice didn't rule their hearts. "Enough of this nonsense," Morrison snarled, raising his pistol. "I'll end this farce with one bullet." But before he could fire, another voice rang out across the desert morning. "Stand down, Captain Morrison, by order of the territorial governor." Every head turned toward the sound, and Isabella gasped as she saw Lieutenant Morrison riding toward them, his young face grim with purpose and a folded document in his hand. "What are you doing here, boy?" Captain Morrison demanded of his younger brother. "Delivering new orders," the lieutenant replied, holding up the document. "Governor Williams has received word from Washington. The Army is to take no action against Apache civilians without explicit federal authorization. That's impossible, the captain protested. My orders came directly from the governor's office. Your orders have been superseded, Lieutenant Morrison said firmly. There's been too much attention from Eastern newspapers, too many questions asked in Congress. The policy has changed. Isabella felt her knees nearly buckle with relief as she realized what had happened. Somehow word of their situation had reached people with the power to intervene. The massacre had been prevented, at least for now, but Captain Morrison wasn't ready to give up his moment of glory. I don't believe you, he snarled. This is some trick, some deception cooked up by these traitors. Then you can explain your insubordination to a military tribunal, Lieutenant Morrison replied coolly, because I'm ordering you to stand down, and I have the authority to do it. For a moment, the two brothers faced each other across a chasm of ideology and conscience. The captain's hand tightened on his weapon, and Isabella held her breath, wondering if blood would flow after all. Then, slowly, Captain Morrison lowered his gun. The fight went out of him as he realized that his moment of revenge had slipped away, leaving him with nothing but the bitter taste of defeat. This isn't over, he said quietly, not by a long shot. Yes, Isabella said, her voice carrying a quiet strength that surprised even her. It is. The hatred ends here with us, with this moment. We choose love instead. As the soldiers began to withdraw, Isabella felt Kaelan's arms slip around her waist. Together they had done something that had seemed impossible. Just days before, they had turned love into a force for peace, transforming personal passion into social change. The future stretched out before them, uncertain but full of possibility. There would be other challenges, other battles to fight against those who preferred hatred to hope. But they would face those challenges together as partners in love and allies in peace. The sun climbed higher over the desert, warming the faces of Apache and white alike as they stood together in the morning light. It was a new day in more ways than one, and Isabella knew that nothing would ever be the same again. She had surrendered to love, and in doing so had discovered something even more powerful, the courage to build bridges where others saw only walls, and the wisdom to choose hope over fear. The world was still a dangerous place, but it was also a place where miracles could happen if people were brave enough to believe in them.